Hey everybody, I hope you're having a great Saturday. We're going to start off our reading today with a book that's actually a series of stories. It's called The Fabled Life of Aesop, and it's by Ian Lendler. It's illustrated by a really amazing artist. I've read some of her books earlier during the week. It's illustrated by Pamela Zagorensky. So I hope you enjoy the stories and the illustrations. Okay, here we go. One day, a slave was born. It was sometime around 2,500 years ago and somewhere near Greece. No one knows for sure because the baby's parents were slaves too. No one recorded the history of slaves, so no one knows their names. The only thing we know is the name they gave their baby boy, Aesop. Aesop was taken from his parents and sent to work in the great fields of Samos, a hot, dry island in the Mediterranean Sea. Growing up, Aesop learned to speak differently from people who were free. Slaves had to be careful what they said. One day out in the field, a slave said to Aesop, "I heard the master has smelly feet." But the master overheard, and that person was never seen again. So slaves learned to tell stories in ways that wouldn't get them in trouble. They spoke about the animals and the natural world around them. The next day in the field, the person working next to Aesop said, "Did you hear the story about the lion? He stepped on a thorn and his paw got infected." "Oh," said Aesop, "so that's why his paw smells." Aesop learned to speak in code. Everyone soon noticed there was something special about Aesop. One day, the water in the well dropped so low that the bucket couldn't reach. No one knew what to do, but Aesop had an idea. Everyone thought it was so clever that they all pitched in to help. The water began to rise, and when it reached the top, their cheers drew the attention of their master, Xanthus. Xanthus decided to test Aesop. He said, "You're clever enough to help slaves, but are you clever enough to help me?" Aesop hesitated. He was scared. He had to find a way to tell the truth without angering his master. He had to speak in code. Aesop said, "One day, a mouse accidentally stepped on a sleeping lion. The lion woke and grabbed the mouse. 'Let me go,' begged the mouse. 'Someday I'll repay you.' The lion laughed at the idea of a puny mouse helping him, but he let the mouse go. When Aesop finished, the next day the lion got trapped in a hunter's net. He roared helplessly. The mouse came running. He gnawed at the net until it broke. The lion was free. 'You see,' said the mouse, 'even a mouse can help a mighty lion.'" When Aesop finished his story, Xanthus laughed and said, "Very clever indeed. Come work in my house, little mouse. You can chew on any nets that trap me." Xanthus put Aesop to work running his business. And one day, Xanthus and another master named Jaden had an argument over money. To settle it, they summoned Aesop and ordered him to judge who was right. Again, Aesop hesitated. Whichever master he chose, the other would be angry. Either one could have him killed. He had to keep both masters happy. He thought, and then he said, "One very hot day, a lion and a boar found a small watering hole. They argued over who should drink first. They began to fight, and as they fought, they noticed that vultures were gathering, waiting to eat the body of the loser. The lion and the boar stopped fighting immediately and shared the water. The vultures went hungry that day." "So, it's better to make peace with your friends," said Jaden, "than be eaten by your enemies." The two masters agreed that Aesop's advice was very wise. They settled their argument peacefully. Jaden was so impressed that he asked to buy Aesop. You see, no matter how clever or kind Aesop was, he was still a slave, and slaves were something to be bought and sold. Xanthus agreed, and once again, Aesop was taken away. In his new home, Aesop went to work. For every problem his new master faced, Aesop created a story about sly foxes, foolish farmers, or clever mice. The stories warned against greed and deceit, and they taught the value of working hard, being honest, humble, and kind. Many of them taught other hidden lessons as well. It was something no master would pick up on, but every slave or powerless person would understand. They taught them how to survive in a world that was sometimes unjust and cruel. So now we're going to read some of Aesop's stories. They were called fables. The Tortoise and the Hare. Once a hare was making fun of a tortoise for being slow. "It's true I'm slow," said the tortoise, "but I can still beat you in a race." The hare thought this was so funny that he agreed to the contest. All the animals in the forest gathered to watch. As soon as the race started, the hare shot out of sight. At the halfway point, he was so far ahead that he decided to lie down and take a nap. Meanwhile, the tortoise kept walking, slowly and steadily, never stopping. After a while, he passed the napping hare and headed toward the finish line. The animals began to cheer on the tortoise. Their cheers woke the hare, who saw the tortoise far ahead. The hare sprinted toward the finish line, but he was too late. The tortoise had won. Slow and steady wins the race. This one's called The Boy Who Cried Wolf. A shepherd boy was tending his sheep in a field near a dark forest. It was boring work, so he decided to have some fun. He rushed into his village shouting, "Wolf! Wolf!" The villagers ran out to the field with pitchforks, but when the shepherd boy started laughing, the villagers realized they had been tricked. They shook their heads and went home. The next day, the shepherd boy did it again. "Wolf! Wolf!" he cried even louder. Again, the villagers ran out to help him. Again, they realized they'd been tricked and walked home grumbling. The third day, the shepherd boy saw an actual wolf come out of the dark forest. "Wolf! Wolf!" he cried in panic, but this time no one came to help. So the wolf ate the entire flock, and then for dessert, he ate the shepherd boy too. No one believes a liar, even when they tell the truth. The North Wind and the Sun. The North Wind and the Sun were trying to decide who was more powerful. When they saw a traveler walking down the road, the Sun said, "Let's have a contest. Whoever can remove the man's coat is the strongest." "That's easy," said the North Wind, and he began to blow. He tore at the man's coat with powerful icy blasts, but the traveler only wrapped his coat tighter around himself. The North Wind gave up exhausted. "It's impossible," he said. Then it was the Sun's turn. She began to shine. The air turned lovely and warm, and the traveler unbuttoned his coat. Soon the traveler decided to enjoy the sunny day, so he lay down in the shade of a tree and took off his coat. People respond better to kindness than to force. This one's called The Fox and the Grapes. A hungry fox came across a bunch of ripe, juicy grapes growing high above his head. The fox's mouth began to water, so he jumped up to grab them, and he missed. So he took a running jump, and he missed again. The fox jumped and jumped, but he couldn't reach the grapes. Finally, he looked at the grapes scornfully and said, "That's okay, I didn't actually want those grapes. They're probably sour." Then he turned away and walked away with contempt. It's easy to pretend to dislike what you cannot have. The Donkey and the Lapdog. There once was a farmer who owned a donkey and a lapdog. The farmer treated the donkey well. He gave him a nice stable, fresh hay, and plenty of water. But in exchange, the donkey had to work in the field all day long. Meanwhile, the donkey saw the lapdog living in the farmer's house and eating scraps from his table. The lapdog's only job was to lie in the farmer's lap and wag his tail. The donkey became jealous. Perhaps if I act like a dog, the donkey thought, the master will start loving me the same way. The next day, the donkey escaped his harness, ran into the kitchen where the farmer was eating his lunch. The donkey wagged his tail furiously like the lapdog, breaking all the dishes on the table. Then the donkey jumped into the farmer's lap and knocked him onto the floor. The farmer yelled for help, and the farmhands rushed in and dragged the donkey away. Don't try to make others like you by trying to be something you're not. The Goose and the Golden Egg. There was once a poor farmer who was amazed to discover that one of his geese laid a golden egg. Every day that goose laid a single golden egg. The farmer and his wife were soon quite rich, but it wasn't long before they became unhappy. They weren't getting rich fast enough, so they decided to kill the goose and take all the gold at once. But when they opened the goose up, there was nothing inside. Their goose was dead, and they never got another golden egg again. If you always want more, you'll lose what you have. The Fox and the Crow. One bright morning, a fox spotted a crow high up in a nearby tree with a hunk of cheese in her mouth. The fox approached the foot of the tree and called up, "My, what a beautiful creature you are." The crow looked down at the fox suspiciously and said nothing. The fox continued to flatter the crow. "I've never seen a creature as perfect as you. Your wings are splendid, your feathers positively gleam in the sun. I only wish I could hear your voice. If it's half as beautiful as the rest of you, I would declare you queen of all birds." The crow was so pleased by the fox's compliments that she forgot her suspicions. She opened her mouth to caw, and down fell the cheese, straight into the fox's mouth. "Thank you," said the fox with a grin. "In exchange for the snack, I will give you a piece of advice. Never trust a flatterer." The Town Mouse and the Country Mouse. A town mouse once went to visit her cousin out in the country. The country mouse served her seeds, roots, and acorns and cold creek water to drink. That night they went to sleep under a bush. The next day the town mouse said to her cousin, You cannot possibly be happy living like this. Come to the city and you'll see how much better life can be." So the country mouse followed her cousin to a large house in the city. They entered the dining room and saw the remnants of the owner's feast. The country mouse couldn't believe her eyes. There was cheese and meat and fruit and sweets, but just as she was about to take a bite, she heard a growling noise. "Uh-oh," said the town mouse. Massive dogs burst through the door. The two mice ran underneath a teacup just in time. They hid there trembling and scared until the dogs went away. And then the town mouse said, "We can go back out to eat. I think the coast is clear." But when she looked over, she saw that the country mouse had packed her bags and put on her coat. "Goodbye, cousin," said the country mouse. It is better to live a simple life in peace than a luxurious life filled with fear. This one's called The Ant and the Grasshopper. One warm summer's day, a grasshopper was merrily chirping and making music when he saw an ant walk by. The ant was struggling to carry a kernel of corn back to his nest. The grasshopper called to the ant, "Why are you working so hard? Come sing with me." "I'm storing food for the winter," said the ant. "You should do the same." "Winter? Who cares about winter?" said the grasshopper. "There's plenty of food today." The ant continued with his work. The grasshopper continued to play. Then winter came. The grasshopper couldn't find food and he had nothing saved. He was starving, so he begged the ant for a bite to eat. The ant told the grasshopper, "Since you spent all summer singing, you can dance to bed without supper. There's a time for work and a time for play." This is The Lion and the Statue. One day, a man and a lion were arguing over who was more powerful. The man claimed humans were more powerful because of their intelligence. To prove his point, the man pointed to a nearby statue of a man defeating a lion in combat. The lion just laughed. That only proves that a man made the statue. If I made a statue, the lion would be the victor. There's more than one side to every story, and the moral depends on who tells it. With the help of Aesop's stories, Jaden became a successful and well-respected man, not just in business, but in life. He became a wiser and more generous person. He learned to treat others with respect. One day he said to Aesop, "I would like to reward you for your service. Ask me for anything, Aesop, and I'll grant your wish." This time, Aesop didn't hesitate. He told a story he'd probably wanted to tell his entire life. One day, a wolf was weak with hunger. A house dog saw the wolf and said, "Cousin, you'll die in the wild. Come work for my master. He'll feed you every day." The wolf was so hungry, he agreed and followed the dog home. As they walked, the wolf noticed the fur on the dog's neck was worn away. "Oh, that's nothing," said the dog. "That's where my master chains me. You get used to it." "In that case," said the wolf, "goodbye, cousin. I would rather starve while I'm free than be well fed in chains." When Aesop finished speaking, Jaden fell silent. He thought for a long time, and then he granted Aesop's wish. For the first time in his life, Aesop was free. Soon, everyone had heard about the slave who was so wise that he had been set free. They went to him for help and advice. Aesop's stories were so memorable that they were told and retold in the streets. As the years went by, the masters grew old and passed away. Their wealth and lands were lost. Their names were forgotten. Aesop, too, eventually passed away, but his fame kept growing. His stories were repeated in homes and town squares for generations, for centuries, until one day someone gathered them all together in a book and called them Aesop's Fables. It became one of the most popular books in history. And in its pages, Aesop, the boy who was born a slave, who told stories to escape, traveled further than any king and lived longer than any empire. He traveled across languages, countries, and continents. He traveled across 2,500 years of time to be here today. And now that you've heard his stories, he can travel for a while with you. The end. So I want to encourage you guys to try to write your own fable. Have a grown-up help you and sit down and write a story that you think teaches a lesson. And it can have animals in it, or it can have people in it. And when you've written your story, have someone put it in a comment on my book. I'll be interested to hear what you have to say. Have a great day.